the Buddyphones Pop samples. So these are obviously new tooled things. I haven't seen this sort of finished tooling. I think the samples I saw before may have been like a T1 or something like that. This is my favorite. I think I like the style. Looks really just right, all nice and smooth, and it looks cohesive. The fitment is really nice too. The slides have just a touch of friction on them, so they feel damped and smooth. It doesn't just flop around. You know, when you touch it, it doesn't shake around and make noises. I really like that about it. Let's see, folds up, kind of, not too bad. See, it's one of those things, it would be nice if it folded from around here somewhere and you could really shorten it down, compress it right down, but that's always a trade-off between how you do your slides and so on. The slide is not too bad. It's got a little bit clickety-clackety, but again, I mean, that is nitpicky. Let's see, that's really lovely. I like that. You don't need a lot of fluffy padding here, you know, just that kind of silicone thing, and that's actually a really fancy way of doing it. So it almost feels like it's fabric there because of the way the molding is done. Quite good. If you open it out, you do have this gap opens up a little bit. Probably not much of an issue, really. Does it click out? It's almost feels like it's got a click in there. I can see a small plastic protrusion to make it have a locking out click, but it doesn't actually click in. If it did, I guess after 20 or 30 uses the plastic would round off anyway. I guess these two are the same, just different colours. Doesn't seem to be any markings to suggest otherwise. Right and left in there, right and left in there. Yeah, they feel very similar. Overall, pretty good. The buttons are pretty good. Oh, did that switch on with a double click? Let me have another go at that. I sort of... Thought it would take a bit more of a long press. Sort of, you get a little flash of light when you touch it. That's interesting. Anyway, doesn't matter too much. There may be some like debounce, which means if I press it a few times quickly, it acts as though it's been held down. Pretty good, though. What I do like is some of the products, the turn on time, you have to press it for quite a long time. This one is 0, 1, just a 1 sort of second. That's all you need. You don't need to force people to hold it down for an eternity to get things switched on. Let's see what the frequency response looks like. Hopefully you can see that clearly enough. Let's have a look. We'll get a Bluetooth test profile, and I'll get that running. So I'll just keep looping the test frequency response only in this case. That into pairing mode, should pick it up in a second. They have a second or two where they try and dial out to previously connected devices, but that's connected and away she goes. Is it? Yes, yes. There's always, when you get connected, there's a few instructions about I'm connected and things like that. Maximum volume, set it up to maximum volume. Plonk it in here. There's our frequency response. The level's quite low, so when I mean, the sound of my voice is a relatively high level compared to the actual audio that we're getting out of it. But we're getting in the order of, I've got 90, so there's little numbers here, you may not see that on the camera. It's the average of the SPL average across the whole spectrum. And I've got 94 and 90, well, when I talk, of course, I'm boosting it. Let me be quiet for a second and get a reading. yeah, I got a 93 point something and 92 point something. So this is probably the nominal 94. Let's check my output levels. What I'll actually do is I'll just boost that up. So the number is, yeah, the output level's a bit higher, so less noisy. In fact, that has, it's showing me now slightly higher. The number here is per unit of output. So if I set the volume up or down, I still get the same number. Basically, this is the SPL at maximum volume. So I have set it to maximum volume now, so we get a slightly better signal to noise ratio. And what are our numbers saying? 93.4 and 92. Okay, same numbers actually. And I guess that is the 94 setting. I can't remember the target numbers, but you're in the range anyway. You know, you can have a plus minus a couple of dB. So that must be in the high mode setting. We double click that, we get 2 lights. We should be down at 85, something like that. And yes, we are 84.4, 83 something. Again, as I talk, I'm introducing a relatively high amount of noise compared to what this actually puts out. The level's very low. So we have to be quiet to get a clean curve. I'll do that and store it quickly. So, okay, just keep introducing noise when I talk. That doesn't matter. We talked about this imbalance. So here's 1 kilohertz right at this point, and the left and right channels have a relatively large difference there. We attempted to fix that by opening up some extra venting on this side to compensate for all of the holes and leakage around the buttons. It's mildly, hang on, I've got it the wrong way around. This one is actually a bit lower. That one's a bit higher, yes, okay. So the net result is that there's still quite a bit of variability in how much leakage we actually get on around the buttons and sockets and so on. You know, the fitment it's quite sensitive. Also, I did notice that the air pad is forming part of the seal between the housing and the rear housing and the front housing, and so it's really going to be quite affected by just the details of how that air pad fits, and each air pad could have different stitching and heat sealed edge, but the holes are there, and it's mildly effective in terms of pulling this dip point to a reasonably similar range. From memory, when we didn't have the additional holes, there was a really huge difference. Now, in terms of the EQ function, that's not at all what we hoped for, unfortunately. Now, there were a lot of issues in terms of getting the required output level matched with the line-in and Bluetooth, whilst not overrunning that amplifier gain. So the EQ tried to pull the levels down. We didn't have enough gain to get the required output level, etc., etc. I never quite got to the bottom of why that was the case. I thought we would have plenty of headroom. I still think that's the case. We would have to investigate that, or basically just run through the design steps from the start and find out why we're not able to play around with the EQ a lot. Of course, if we do put in a lot of EQ, the difference between using Bluetooth and then just a cable which is not using that Bluetooth EQ chip would be a lot greater. Although I don't think it's not a good idea to sacrifice the audio quality because you've got this backup feature effectively of a line-in cable. We should focus on getting a really good sound out of Bluetooth and say, look, this is a backup feature. You can still listen to it. It's not as great, but who's going to use it? What's the point of putting all your eggs into the basket of getting the line in to match the Bluetooth when probably most people will never use that? Okay, so anyway, the levels are about right. Whether we use the 1 kilohertz method or this sum of the whole spectrum. Some of the whole spectrum is a better way of doing it. The 1 kilohertz, of course, is massively affected by the details of these chamber ventings and so on. There's huge differences, even between left and right of this one sample. There's almost The scale is 5. I can see 5 dB difference between left and right in that 1 kilohertz range. So, you know, that's almost the entire level setting difference, and you can't make a judgment about the level based on the one frequency point, and that's what's happened. Okay, that's that one. I can switch that off for now. I'll switch this one on. It's in pairing mode. Not yet, actually. It's still trying to call out to previous connections. Now it's in pairing mode. Now it's connected. I don't know the left and right and left. Okay, good. It's in the higher dB setting. I'll just switch that to the same one so we can compare the overlay curves. Quiet for a moment and we'll see what it stacks up like. Interesting, the right channels are actually very similar and the left channels have quite a difference. That is counterintuitive. Have I got a left and rights mixed up maybe? No, that's correct. So that's interesting. I suspect what's happening is the vent holes that are on this flat surface are sometimes blocked by the airpad and sometimes not. It just depends how the airpad sits in there, which is kind of random. So that is having a large influence on the venting effect. It's a shame. It happens that this unit is relatively well balanced. This one is less well balanced. But again, overall the levels are the same. We've got a reading of 85 aggregate and some of the spectrum and 82.5. Well within the tolerance, an acceptable tolerance for this type of item. Okay, we're not trying to dial it into 0.5 dB. And check the high range. Seems to be a bit of difference between left and right. Let's make sure we've got it seated nicely. Yeah, quite a sensitivity difference. I've got a balance one here, 2 and something dB average balance difference. Not that bad, I guess. 2 dB again, it's still within the classic plus minus 3 tolerance. Looks worse because of the scale and because this one has got almost no difference, at least in the low frequencies. Now on the topic of EQ, yeah, so that doesn't look at all like we expected the EQ to be, almost as though there's nothing happening there. I wonder if that has been pretty much chucked out the window in order to get the that 1 kHz level to hit the targets. So it's an oddity, of course, because the 1 kHz level is set based on one pre-production sample. Then you go ahead and build the actual things, and you have all these variabilities shifting around. So it's not that clear if that one sample actually represents all the production. But again, it's good enough. Let's check what happens when we use a line in. I want to see that. Grab a cable. What have we got? This should do the job for us. Do I get an override from this cable? No, the Bluetooth is still running even although that's plugged in. I thought that when you plugged it in you had an override on the audio path. Obviously not. Yeah, okay, alright then. Well, we'll pull up just a test for cabled headphones there quickly. I'll just modify it slightly, the output there. So I'll set the output voltage right up to 1 volt is basically what we want to run this baby at. I'm not sure, I don't remember offhand what we decided was the right level for setting the limiting. I think 1 volt. I'll get rid of these tests that are doing channel balance THD blah blah blah. We just want to see the response curve, see what we get. not plugged in properly. There we go. It's way higher at using the line in. That's unexpected. It's a bit clipped out actually. I'll just back that level off. Let's do it, say 700 millivolt. Maybe they've set it at 700 millivolts. Could be. You're at almost 100 dB per volt. This is, again, it's scaled to per volt input. So if it's 700 millivolts, you'd be down something like 3 dB, or I'd have to check on a calculator. So that is probably at the 92 something dB setting. No, you'll be down by a certain amount if you are basing your maximum level at, say, 700 millivolts rather than 1 volt. And that curve looks to be the same, so it suggests to me that there is actually no EQ function, or almost a minimal nothing EQ function being done on the Bluetooth signal. So the line in is, yeah, the line is giving us almost the same response as the Bluetooth response shape, which suggests that there is no EQing being done on the Bluetooth. That's odd. That is odd. It's a balance like there. Yeah, it's the same. It's the 2 dB. It probably looks a little bit more than it is. Let's try this one. Get that out of the way. Let's try this one. Cable's a bit shonky or something, isn't it? It's not. Yeah. Here we go, here we go, here we go. Okay. Yeah, it seems to the level's about the same. It depends on what voltage you're using as your reference for maximum voltage. If it's 1 volt, you're at about 100 dB almost level. If you're using a lower voltage, so if it would be 500 millivolts, be -6, maybe that's the level, and then you'll be at 94-ish, slightly under perhaps. So maybe based on 500 millivolts rather than the full 1 volt. Fair enough. It's arbitrary. At some point you decide what kind of signal source is being used and how much voltage that can put out. So what's the maximum level? Still very low. I think that like the EN50332 standard is 150 millivolts, something like that. You must be under 100 dB, so we're definitely well under that even at this. We're at 100 dB at 1 volt, so quite significantly different. Okay, fine. Anyway, the EQ thing is a bit troubling. Let's have another look at the... yes, we're sort of at that and that are more or less the same. I'll just switch back to the Bluetooth test. Are you in pairing mode? You're in pairing mode. We'll shut you off and we'll switch you on. And we'll start this one. See if it connects up. There we go. Huh, failed to connect. Try again. Maybe we'll shut it off and try it. Restart it. Stop that. Start you again. Actually, start you continuously. Switch that into pairing mode again. Let's see if we get it this time. Should be available for pairing now. Huh. Well, let's reboot, see how we go. Start you up again. Okay, good. Here we go. So this is the max volume. It says there's quite a delay before you can start actually measuring something because of those. So that's maximum volume, is it? Maybe if I unplug that. Yeah, I would say that this basically is no EQ operating on it. We're going to have to look into that a little bit more carefully. It's a shame that we ran into those problems because the structure of the thing, the potential for a good audio response is really there. But this type of response, I know from experience, is not. It's not going to sound. It's going to sound very muddy. It's not going to be fantastic, but it could be. So. That is a shame. Okay, that's it for now.